And we're live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual presentation of Anna K. Away with author Jenny Lee and moderator Katharine McGee. We have signed copies of Anna K. Away available. To purchase one, just click on the green purchase button link right below the viewer screen. It'll take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. Just make sure to write signed copy in the comment section when you're completing your order online so that we know to set a signed copy aside for you. Also, if you're planning to share this event with a friend, don't worry, a replay link will be available after the broadcast ends. And we will be taking questions during the last 15 minutes of this event. So to ask questions, just use the Ask a Question button at the very bottom of the screen. You can also vote for any questions you'd like, and they'll make their way to the very top of the list. Okay, so with that said, let me introduce our speakers for tonight, and then we can get started. So Jenny Lee is a television writer and producer who has worked on BET's Boomerang, IFC's Brockmire, Freeform's Young and Hungry, and the Disney Channel's #1 rated kids show, Shake It Up. She's previously published humor essay collections and middle grade novels, and Anna K. is her debut YA novel. And joining her tonight is Katharine McGee, who is the New York Times bestselling author of the Thousands Floor series. She studied English and French literature at Princeton and has an MBA from Stanford. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to turn my camera off and enjoy the talk, everyone.
Yes, well, thanks so much and for hosting us. And of course, thanks, Jenny, for asking me to do this. And congratulations on the launch of a sequel. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. It's been kind of a fun day. I woke up early and I drove to Vroman's Bookstore in Pasadena because I live in Los Angeles. It's about 30 minutes away, and I got to sign books, and it was the first bookstore I've been in since the Strand Bookstore, the original Anna K., the last event on March 9th of 2020. So it was kind of exciting to be again. I know. I mean, granted, obviously we had masks on and stuff to sign, but it was, yeah, it's crazy. It's been a long time. So, but I'm so excited to be here with you because I hosted your sequel event, right? That was at Politics and Prose.
It was the paperback launch of American Royals, which is my more recent series. Because the paperback came out last year, and you were so sweet to do that because I think it was a month or so after Anna K. had come out. So you were in the thick of it, I know. Yeah. But of course, I loved Anna K. so much. So your editor, of course, reached out to me last year when the book was still in manuscript and asked me to read it early. And I had, just from the opening page, I had the absolute best time. I could not put it down. And I often get asked to blurb books, and I often say no because they aren't my taste. And so I always feel uncomfortable and dread having to say, this just wasn't for me. And it was such a relief to read yours and be like, not only do I like this, I love it. It is so much fun. It is so the type of book I would pick up on my own as a consumer. And it was a delight from start to finish. And so it was so fun to get to also read the sequel a little bit early, and then of course to get to do this with you. So let's dive in and talk sequels, because I know we chatted a little bit via text over the course of the years. We were both working on sequels and we're commiserating about it. I have written plenty in my day and know that for me, it's so much harder to dig back in. And it feels very counterintuitive because I always feel like, well, now I know the world and I know the characters, so it should just be a breeze by this point. And yet for some reason, it's not. So I feel like I know the answer. It was the similar situation for you. How did the writing process go this time around? How was it different from Anna K.?
It did not go well, I would say. It was just so tough. It's tough because also we have a global pandemic that we've been in for the last 15 months. So that also was the overhanging thing. I had probably 70% of the sequel done by the time the first book came out. So in March of last year, it just wasn't finished. And then the pandemic hit and then the world stopped. And I was like, I don't know, is this the right tone? I mean, is this the right time? We just, it was scary. We didn't know what was going to be happening. So I really just put everything on pause for a good 4 months and didn't even finish. And then, everyone's like, oh, the Anna K was, luckily for me, doing fairly well in the pandemic. People did want escapism and like fun, soapy sort of things to get away. And they were like, I think you just keep going with the sequel. It's going to be fine. But I ended up throwing out probably a good half of what I had and kind of restarted and started over just because I was in a different mood in terms of writing. And I know you have written other sequels before, but this was my first sequel. And I think I was a little cocky and was not cocky. I just was kind of thought, I was like, oh my God, sequel fun. I love the characters. I already know the world. And then I had the idea that I'd love to do a summer book because the first book ended at the end of a school year. And I was like, oh, let's just see how rich kids party in the summer. It was kind of honestly my entire idea for the book. And I thought it would be super thin and like really fun and soapy in summer. And it wasn't that at all. It just was, I don't know. I just was like, obviously the first book was kind of, loosely based or as a retelling of Anna Karenina. So I did have a plot, but I foolishly did not outline. I promise I will never do that again on a book. And I just kind of got lost in the stories and everyone was traveling in the book and separate that I didn't even have like the location where they were all together. So it became very disjointed and I sort of was spiraling in the pandemic. And I can't tell you how many different storylines of Anna that I did and threw out, like a bunch. And that's so not like me. I'm usually not, it just doesn't go that way. In TV, you kind of do a bunch of different stories and you're constantly throwing things out. So I thank God I at least had that skill set because otherwise I think I would have been doomed. But I did finally get it there. We did, with the help of my husband, who was the only person I got to see for the last 15 months.
I know. Well, what do we do without our life partners who are also writing partners?
Yes.
So I can totally relate to everything you said. I have thrown out plenty of storyline in my day. I know exactly what you mean by feeling cocky and feeling like the sequel, it seems like it should totally be just a fun walk in the park and then having it surprise you. So I'm a little surprised though to learn that you really are a pantser, that you write kind of by the seat of your pants when you don't have a Tolstoy outline to work from. So how did you decide kind of what, I know that clearly there were a lot of wrong turns as there always are, but how did you decide on the different directions that each of these stories were taking? I read in your PW piece earlier today that you felt very strongly, and I don't want to spoil anything for those who haven't read, which is I'm sure everyone on here, but that Anna's story should not be centered on a fun new romance,
right,
which I also can relate to because I've ended books. American Royals book 1 ends in a somber note, and it was very hard to dig my characters out of the sad place that they began the second book in and kind of launch their stories anew. And so I really respected that because I was so curious going into the second book. I was thinking, what is Jenny going to do with Anna now that we don't have Vronsky? How are we going to where are we going to take the sequel? And you really, rather than follow the infinite plot lines that were all tangled together in the first, you really crystallized the story into 3 directions, which I think are 3 very different stages of love. So you had Anna, and then you had a sort of a falling in love for the first time story, and then you had a mature relationship that's being tested story. How did you kind of land on all those different directions? Did you consciously decide all that, or did it just sort of come to you as you were staring at the blank page?
Katharine or Katie is making me sound very smart, like I really figured everything out, and it wasn't like that at all. I did know that the Lolly Stevens storyline, which is was the relationship that's tested. That one I did kind of know about, and I was like, oh, we're going to see a mature relationship and see it's a different bit of a flip than what happened in the first book. That thing where she's so scared her boyfriend's going to cheat while she goes away to theater camp because he cheated on her before. And then there's, no spoiler alert, there's a little bit of reversal. She's the one who kind of has a crush. So that one was like a no-brainer for me and was the easiest out of all of them to write. But with Anna, that was just truly the tough one because my editors, I don't even know if they're watching, but if they were like, oh, too sad. Everything I wrote in the beginning was like very mopey and sad for her because I really was like, oh, she just had a huge loss in her life. How can I have her all of a sudden like, woohoo, I'm traveling? It just didn't seem real to me. And also because of the pandemic, I really was like in a somber place myself, I guess. So I just wanted to like really do that. I had a really dark storyline for her too. It was still the K-pop thing where she goes to Seoul, but it kind of ended up being nothing so terrible, but like the same character, she kind of got involved where he was like using her for publicity, and a photo of hers kind of ended up in the wrong place and then went viral. And I was like, that's such a bummer. She just had all this trauma. And then I was like, and then that was the last time I threw out her story. And I was like, I need to find something that's connected to love, because I knew I didn't want her to fall in love again. I thought it was too soon, because this is literally directly right after the first book ended. So I was like, that didn't seem true to like who the character, that she would fall in love again so quickly. But I was like, oh, I need her to start to rebuild her heart and her heartbreak by helping another couple with their love story. And but by doing that, that would kind of help mend her and her understand that. So that, I don't know where I pulled that out of, because, but
I really liked all that. And I thought, so to be completely honest with you, when I was predicting what was going to happen in this book, I thought you were going to use the age-old trick of time jump, like it's 5 years from now and we can skip all the sad stuff, because it's such an easier technique to just kind of pick up, to leave all of the sort of ugly, messy stuff off camera. It's certainly what we would have done in television. Well, I say we, but you're the TV writer. But I feel like any TV show would have kind of just been like, surprise, surprise, we're going to pick up in a year and a half or 2 years when all the grieving is over and we can move on. And I think it's so rare to see in a romance novel and in a young adult novel to really actually grapple with all of the messiness and the sadness of those issues, and a loss that earth-shaking. And so I really, and I love that you did that, but also that you found these other ways to make her story feel more uplifting, and then of course to balance it with stories that sort of brought the tone back to where it was in the first book. So you still have all of the glitter and the fun of it, but you definitely tackled more serious issues this time around, no question.
I know. I actually rewrote Anna's first chapter so late. Like, honestly, it was in January. I mean, that the paperback book of Anna K that came out that last month has the wrong first chapter. It's like a sneak peek, and then it's actually a different chapter, because once I was doing it, I was like, oh, this is an unprecedented time for all of us, honestly, the pandemic, but definitely for teenagers, right? I mean, and yes, I do. Young people are very resilient. So I think, I have hope that everyone will come out of this. Possibly they will come out better than we will. But I wanted to say that I was like, oh, but Anna had an unprecedented sort of loss as well. I mean, obviously a lot of young people do experience loss at a young age, but hers was a very tragic, kind of thing that it's just not the norm. And so I was like, oh, maybe I can explore it. Like maybe what everyone's kind of going through in her eyes, that you just that it is messy and you don't know what's going to happen. And then you feel all sorts of emotions. So that was very important to me. But I will say there were many, many like super sad chapters that got cut continually, because they were like, Jenny, so sad. Come on, let's have her. And I was like, no, you're right. I knew it. I was trying to find the right tone. It really was a struggle, because I wanted, the audience deserves like what they kind of think they're getting too. I didn't want to do a bait and switch where they're like, ooh, fun, glitzy book, and then have it be a bummer, so I really kind of was trying to figure that out. So I think I did it kind of.
You did. Can you tell me about one of the devices that you used in Anna's story that was so beautiful, were the letters from Vronsky that really structured her story? Is that something out of the original Tolstoy? Were there any things that you pulled from the actual Anna Karenina that made their way into book 2? I was kind of wondering if there were any stray Tolstoy plot lines that kind of resurfaced here. No, it was all fresh.
There was a time though when I was like deep in the spiral of like, oh my gosh, this isn't working, and what am I going to do? Where I was like, maybe I should go back in and like, could I structure it through, should I crash read War and Peace, though I don't know if that's possible, or a different book, and then kind of structure it that way, and that sort of a thing. But I was like, it was almost too late to like try to go down that avenue. So
pretty late to try to crash read War and Peace.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the letters to me was like, that was a device, because I pulled that in the middle of it. It wasn't like I always had this idea. And I was like, what if I could ground her grief in something that she was doing that would still be a reminder of what happened, but then she could be moving forward at the same time. So
Right.
there were once like 27 letters. It's very hard to write love letters from a teenage boy perspective and have them be good and not terrible.
And not cheesy.
Yes.
Yeah. Or just a little bit cheesy.
Yeah.
I know. So there were a lot of supporting characters from the first book who really take center stage here. I feel like, Lolly narrated some in the last book, and then I feel like Beatrice narrated. Did she narrate at all? I only remember her being a really fun centerpiece of her party chapter when she threw that outrageous dinner party and was like playing drinking games with everyone. And then she becomes such an anchor of this book this time around. How did you kind of decide who you were going to really focus on and who you were going to let take a step back? Kimmy, for instance, it's still present in this story, but I would not say she's one of the central characters anymore.
I think I always knew since Anna Kay was about first love, I was like, oh, I want to see another character fall in love for the first time in a big way. And Beatrice was a much smaller character. She was Vronsky's like party girl cousin. Mm-hmm. She was pansexual in the first one and just wild and like spent money. And I just, it's so funny. She's kind of this character that people either love her or they were like, ugh, hate Beatrice and stuff. It's just one or the other, honestly. Like some people are like, oh my God, she's so funny because she's a little bit like so mouthy and so like, just shock about, like she's trying to shock everyone. So mm-hmm. That's why in this book, she goes to LA for an internship for the summer. But Vronsky was her cousin, so she's also dealing with grief. So I was like, let's see another version where you just go in deep denial and then just kind of spin out, basically. And then I really was like, oh, I want to see her fall in love. And also with, I really did also want to make sure I had like a queer storyline in it in terms of love, because I really didn't have one. I mean, Beatrice, again, was a minor character in the first one, and she was went from bisexual and then pansexual, but I wanted to kind of just focus on that. That said, though, I really wanted to do the research. So I actually, Mackenzie Lee, the author,
yes.
The author. I was on a panel with her. I met her for the first time in North Texas when I met you. And she and I kept in touch because we both have large dogs. And I reached out to her and I was like, I need to write an authentic sex scene between two women. Can you help me? I mean, I just wanted to make sure that like she
right, of course,
guidance, because it was like a new territory for me and I wanted to
That's awesome.
I nailed it. And so I don't know if she actually read the final yet because I sent her a book. So I'm not sure if I nailed it, but I was like, I really, was very careful about that. And I just wanted to see like, the thing, the girl who, and I think I was a little bit like this in college. I was like, oh, I considered myself edgy and cool. And I just wasn't into romance and love and would rather like have adventure and like sex and boys and, be a troublemaker. So I thought it's very poignant though. I think when a character who kind of runs from love falls in love for the first time, it's something that I'm sort of fascinated by. So that's why I was like, oh, I want to put she'll be the one who falls in love really big for the first time. So.
Oh no, her chapters are so fun, and I really love her voice. I thought I always got excited when I got to a Beatrice chapter because I feel like her voice is very snarky and sharp. So I feel like in some ways she's your Daphne. Like my character Daphne is the one that people often love to hate, but she's kind of fun to write. And I feel like I could tell you were having fun writing the Beatrice chapters. And I loved her romance. It was so beautiful and so much fun. So the world gets so much bigger in this book. We were just in New York and kind of Westchester and the Hamptons before, and now we're in Korea and brief stopovers in Italy and riding the Orient Express and LA, of course. How did you decide to make the story stretch all over the globe and still bring it all together back in New York at the end?
I think I knew, since it was going to be in the summer, I was thinking that, I was not a rich kid back in the day. And so, but I do remember that idea of like, it just sounded so glamorous to go abroad, or people who summered, and then they just go away for the whole summer because they have a lot of money and they can jet set around. And I was like, oh, these kids are probably of that set. So when I was thinking of like a sequel and like a fun summer book, I was like, oh, I want to see everyone go everywhere. I didn't really take into account that, again, it could really make the book disjointed if all the main characters are all over the place. Because in the beginning, I was going to do the structure as June, July, August. But then I started to structure it with time like that. all of a sudden all the time zones like do come into play. And 4th of July and Labor Day are big American holidays, but they're not holidays like in Korea. So that I grounded in a holiday like I did in Valentine's Day for Anna Kay. So I mean, that's yet another reason why I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to like grapple everyone together? And I knew while I was writing everyone so separate, I was like, oh, I knew I was going to end in the Hamptons. I mean, I spent when I was in New York City in my 20s, I definitely went to the Hamptons a bunch. Like, not a lot. I never went every, weekend in the summer, but I did usually end up there in Labor Day because someone had a house. So Labor Day is like the end of summer and you go to the Hamptons. So I was like, oh, that's when I'll get them all back together. So that was the plan.
No, that all makes sense. But because you had all these different settings, I felt like it made the book feel almost epic in this new way. And I particularly enjoyed Anna's K-pop story. So can you tell us a little more about that? What's your relationship with K-pop? Do you listen to it while you're writing? Do you have a favorite group?
I do, all those things. My favorite group is Blackpink. I saw them in 2019 at Coachella. They were the first K-pop group to ever perform at Coachella because I was there. It was when Ariana Grande was headlining and Billie Eilish was first kind of hitting the scene and exploded in the book, in the first Anna Kay book. I was there and we had these great passes. So we were like front, of the stage. And I couldn't believe that it was like a K-pop band. It was that popular because so many people were rushing over to see. And then when they started singing, everyone was singing with them in Korean. And I was like, what is happening? I had no idea that was, I mean, I obviously knew the popularity of K-pop, but to see it live and to see people who aren't Korean singing Korean was really astounding. And I did ask someone next to me, I was like, how did you learn the words? And they just learn it phonetically. They love the song and and I actually don't speak, I'm Korean, but I don't speak Korean. And when I was younger, and I have a terrible voice, so as a present from my mom, she would listen to Korean music. And there was like a pop song, probably like a love song that she loved. And I remember writing it out phonetically so I could sing it with her, not knowing what I was saying at all, but it's like a Mother's Day gift or something like that I did that for her once. And so I was like, oh my gosh, that's what people do when they love something, because music really kind of can transcend the language, and those girls really are so fun to watch and dance, and they have such huge fan base. So I definitely knew I wanted to do a K-pop thing. And now, I mean, as a Korean writer in Hollywood, I get every single K-pop pitch. Do you know what I mean? Like it comes across my desk where they're like, so-and-so studio has a K-pop movie they want to do. There's a lot of K-pop movies in development right now. Like, honestly, I feel like every single studio has one, and a lot of
That's not surprising.
Yeah, exactly.
It's amazing.
It's like the next sort of thing. And it's funny because I've been in Hollywood now for 12 years. And 5 years ago, I was like, K-pop's going to be the next big thing. And I would try to pitch things and it just never, I don't know, I couldn't get anything through. And then now I'm like, oh, now it's like K-pop everything. But I love it. It's just so, I don't know, it's so upbeat and fun. I've always had very young girly music taste. It's just like what I like. I like to listen to it that's probably the only music I listen to when I write. I don't really listen to music that much, but my husband made an Anna Kay soundtrack list that had all the music from the book. And then when I had my book party, he made a whole playlist, and it has a lot of K-pop. I mean, it has a lot of Blackpink. So that's kind of the one thing that I have kind of going when I write.
I love that. That's a really good job for your husband. Well done, him, to make the K-pop, to make the Anna Kay playlist. That's so fun. I agree with you. I think the reason it pairs well with your writing is because it's just so, it's upbeat. It's like makes you smile. And I feel like that's kind of why it also dovetailed so nicely with Anna's story, in that it was the right counterpoint to her grief to kind of help pull her out of it.
Right.
I see people asking for the playlist in the comments.
I know. I'll have to look about how you do that on Spotify and just publish the playlist. It's a really good playlist.
That's so fun. So were there other parts of Korean culture that really, I mean, obviously you as a Korean American writer, probably with Anna's story, as she goes back to Korea and is kind of struggling with the question of whether she's going to stay and go to school there for her senior year or go back to New York and sort of face her demons. There was a lot that she is unpacking over the course of the novel about her heritage and the fact that she, like you, doesn't speak the language. and can only communicate with her grandmother to a certain degree, and of course comes into conflict with her grandmother over the degree of formality and expectations of the culture. Like, how much of that is where did you draw upon your personal experiences for all of Anna's sort of soul searching over the summer, and kind of and all of the conflict that she has in coming to terms with her Korean American identity and the Korean part of it?
A lot, actually. I don't know if that was the original intent, but it sort of just happened naturally. I was born in Nashville, Tennessee, so I am like second generation Korean American. And then, my parents who came over from Korea, 50 years ago, they were, they kind of wanted to assimilate, right? And my father was a doctor, and we lived in these small towns in Tennessee. There were no other Korean families or kids, so I only learned how to speak English. And that helped them because they were trying to learn how to speak English, so it was fine. I mean, I kind of regret it a little bit now. I'll tell you a funny story about the audiobook in the Korean language in a moment, but with the grandmother, I mean, honestly, I'm Anna's parents' age, basically. So it's kind of, I'm seeing like the Korean grandmother is a little bit like my mother, who was very strict and very not as strict probably as Anna's Korean grandmother, but very, very much about presentation and, keeping things private, and like girls being like respectful and quiet. And I've had a lot of difficulties with my mom over it because, we're just, she was raised in a completely different culture, and I am an American Korean, yes, Korean American, but I'm like an American girl. So I was like very much strong woman, mouthy. My mom was like, you talk too loud, you talk too much for a girl. It was always for a girl. And I just rebelled at that from a very young age. And it was just always it was always a contentious thing. And I really felt like Anna would kind of be in the same place. So the thing that's interesting is that her dad kind of favoring her over the son is sort of an anomaly in Korean culture. Usually it's like the sons are always revered. Like my brother, it's like, my brother, and it was like, my mom literally once told me that, as a daughter, the Korean girls are expendable. Like, not meaning like we can get rid of them, but in the sense that in Korean culture, the daughter leaves and joins her husband's family. So it's because it's like filial piety. So the sons are expected to take care of the parents when they get older. So that's why they have to be so nice to the sons, because they're the ones who are going to take care of them. And the daughters, they're like, oh, well, yes, we love you, but as soon as we marry you off, you're not our issue anymore. You have to then respect and take care of your husband's parents. So I understand the background, why they do that, but it's just so different from obviously how I was raised. So I wanted to make sure that, it's just such a different culture, the politeness and the, and I wanted to be super respectful, obviously, of the Korean culture. I read a bunch of books about Korean culture before I was working on this to make sure I sort of got it right. I certainly didn't want to piss anyone off, basically, because of with my American viewpoints of how it was. But there is a wave in Korea now, though, of feminism that's just never really been there before, because it is still a little behind the times, I think, about it. In 2018, there was an article, it was in the New York Times, and it was talking about the Korean government was trying to figure out why the birth rates were slipping in Korea, and that Korean women weren't having as many children. And it was because, they were stuck doing all the work. And they did put a little article about trying to be like, here's how we can help Korean women, when you're getting pregnant, they're like, you prep all the stuff before and maybe hang up a dress so that after that will remind you not to help you lose the baby weight afterwards. And I was like, what am I reading? It's crazy. It was,
oh my gosh,
incredibly sexist. I mean, that culture is a very patriarchal, culture. And I was like, no wonder the women are rebelling, because it really was all designed towards make sure your husband has nice meals, and while you take care of this and make yourself look pretty, which is kind of what a little bit I got growing up, that was always one of the most important things, which is so antithesis of what I think women in America should be, or young girls, be smart, have a personality, do your own thing. So I think I really was very careful with trying to have her navigate that field, and also have her father he kind of, never put Anna in her place. It's he's in a tough position when he's with his mother. I tried to make it he's pleasing two sides, because he obviously doesn't want his daughter to be like that. But at the same time, he has to be, respectful of his mom. So I think that's a little bit, I see that dynamic with my own brother, dealing with my mom and his kids.
Well, and it is such a tension because you're showing this kind of the young segment of Korean society that's going out to clubs, and the women are like buying snail face masks and, you know, drinking cocktails and wearing leather pants, and then this coming into such conflict with these older generations who are frowning on all this behavior. Have you read Frances Chaw's book, If I Had Your Face?
No, I haven't, but I
read it. It's really interesting. It follows 4 young women in modern day Seoul, and I read it earlier this year in the pandemic, and it was a really fun read. So I definitely recommend it. It's adult fiction, so it goes to some gritty places that you and I do not in young adult, but was really well done.
Right.
So I know there are so many things I wanted to ask you. Oh, the summertime fun time party. It was such a delightful end. I feel like it was the perfect set piece to draw everyone back together. How did you decide on the theme for it?
So silly, right?
You just mishmash things on the wall.
Yeah, basically. I mean, even the term summertime fun time, it was brought up in the first book when Anna and her brother were like eating ice cream and they were talking about when they were kids and they wanted to throw a party and they made a summertime fun time party. The story that came out of is that when I first met my husband 7 years ago, he lived in Brooklyn and I lived in Los Angeles. And so when I wasn't working, I rented an apartment in New York City for, just for in Avenue A or whatnot for like a month. And we just really, and so I could hang out with him. And then we wanted to have like a summertime party. And so we're like, oh, let's just have a party. And we didn't have a theme. And so we're like, let's call it, I think it was supposed to be fun times in the summer. And we ordered a huge cake from Brooklyn, a strawberry shortcake, but whoever took the order wrote summertime fun time instead. And then I was like, oh my God, what a great thing. It's a summertime fun time
party. That.
Huge cake. So it was like a happy accident. So I used it for that. And then when I was thinking about Stephen's party, oh my gosh, my husband and I talked about it endlessly about like how silly it would be, because it's like with Stephen, such a fun character, because it's like he really does have good taste and he really cares and he thinks of himself as a trendsetter. And I was going to do an end of the world party. And I was like, oh, it's a great idea, end of the world, because I've read about that. I thought that sounded sort of fun with a dystopian theme. And I went into like all the research of the Hamptons at that time in 2019, and there was already an end of the world party that had happened like in real life. And I was like,
oh my gosh,
who cares? I mean, I was like, oh, I should do it. But then part of me was like, oh, I don't want to do that now. So then I was like, oh, I'll just write that that's what happened to Stephen. And then he came up with this thing. The mermaid thing, honestly, I don't know. Who doesn't love a mermaid? And I was like, oh, that would be
fun. Love the mermaids. I was like, I want to be a mermaid at that party, kind of.
Absolutely. The Shambhala.
Watching it all.
My husband, during the pandemic, was playing these Nathan Drake video games on the PS4 that's like a treasure hunter. And there was one, I think it was during the time that I was writing it, where he goes to a magical land known as Shambhala. We were like, what's Shambhala? And we were just like, Shambhala, party Shambhala. And we just made a lot of jokes about it. So when we were doing it, we did that. And then steampunk comes from the fact that my husband makes fun of me all the time because I'm like, I don't understand exactly what steampunk is. It's like a cat wearing a hat with a monocle. Like, is that steampunk? And we would always joke like, what exactly is, he's like, it's something in the future, but it also looks like old-timey period piece clothes. So we were always making jokes. So then he's like, oh, let's just do all the weird things that you do. And if you
combine them all
fancy, if you make it look fancy, everyone's like, oh, it's so fresh and interesting. And then hence you have a Stephen K. party.
Yes, Stephen is such a lovable character. I feel like if I was going to hang out with any of them, I might actually pick him, just because I feel like there's no chance you would have a bad time with Stephen. He would ensure that you had a really good day. So you've mentioned your husband a lot. I'm so curious, what is it like being married to another writer? Because my husband weighs in also on all my plot difficulties, but he's not actually an experienced plotter. He just has a brain and can help me think through things. But he works in real estate, so he's like not in. But I mean, is it is it ever a clash of personalities? Do you trade each other's books and read them? Is it like actually quite cozy and delightful, or sometimes are you just like, oh my gosh, too many writers in the house?
It's definitely not that. I mean, my husband has written like this series called The Zombie Chasers, which is also an alloy book, like Catherine's, and they were really fun, but middle grade. And it was a series of 7. And then he wrote another 5 books of different series before. And he's very methodical. He is very much a plotter. He's not a pantser at all. So that was driving him crazy when I was attempting. I was like, I'm just going to write it, see how it goes. And he was like, that's crazy. Like, he just would never think to do that. But I mean, I did know that obviously in the first book, I did have the plot line of Anna Karenina to go, but I certainly didn't outline. I just was like, just went for it. And that one worked for me. Like, that's why I think I was thought I could do it for this one, because part 1 of Anna K really is following the book. But then I start to deviate a little bit and then had certain signposts, but I somehow did manage to make it interweave and all work out. And so, but in the second one, I did not. So it's actually great because both of his parents were English teachers. He is such a good editor. He's like, I mean, in the editor in the sense of like sentence structure and like making the flow better. And I am all about voice and dialogue and plot and fun. And I write very fast and very quickly. And he is very slow and methodical. So he usually kind of goes, helps me in that way, because he kind of like helps me edit and he's like, oh, this doesn't belong here. Like, he's the one who can kind of look at it in a granular level, where I think I always go big picture first and then have to slowly in revisions get there. So I think we just kind of almost approaching it from 2 sides, and usually we can meet in the middle. So, I mean, this book, especially because of the pandemic, he was like my only person to talk to and like a cheerleader. Like, he was the one who was continually giving me pep talks. And I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. I was just panicking a lot, which could have been just regular anxiety, stress, and he was like, no, you got this. You have this. You have this. I mean, he was continually saying that. He's like, we'll get there. We'll get there. But eventually we did card it and put it on a board, because it was just like, we wanted to make sure the flow wasn't disjointed with so many characters and locations.
That's so helpful. And it's so good to just have another person that you can talk things out with and just, and say ideas aloud and realize whether they actually even make sense. Right. I think this is a very hard job, and doing it in isolation is really difficult. And I totally agree with you. The pandemic made things hard. I have been amused by the number of people who looked at me and been like, you must have just had the most productive year ever in 2020. Like, that, it's like, what, like, good on you. This is like, that was probably the best year ever for you, because you just got to really hunker down and write. And I'm like, are you delusional?
Yeah,
no, it was not like, oh goody, I get to stay in my house and write because there's nothing else to do. It was stressful and anxiety inducing, and no one knew what was happening, and our attention was pulled in a million different directions. So I'm impressed. I actually did not write a full book last year at all. I wrote like snippets of 3 different books, and none of them exist yet. So
that's what I
am impressed that you wrote a book in the pandemic. That is no small feat.
By the skin of my teeth. Let me tell you, I barely eked it out. It was just like,
sometimes that's how it happens.
Yeah, exactly. Now it's great. Now it's like, oh my gosh, we all got there, and like, thanks to the team and the editors and Flatiron, everyone encouraging me. I mean, definitely
would be nowhere without our editors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you share what obviously you're doing publicity for Anna K. Away right now, but are you writing anything? I know you finished this one not long ago, so you may want to be taking a little bit of a writing break. And also I know you're working on some fun TV projects. So Can you share anything?
Unfortunately, what's sad about like the Hollywood, I can't really share anything. I mean, I am working on like in one of these mini writers' rooms, which is what they're doing because of the production pipeline during the pandemic shut down. So they're like a lot of shows that were in development that they haven't greenlit yet because they don't know. Because when you get greenlit, it's like you go into production and things start, you start happening, etc. There's such a backlog of other shows that need to go first that were stopped, that they're not doing that. But so they're doing a lot of these mini rooms of shows. So I luckily do have like, it's not based on IP that I wrote. It's a different kids book series about vampires that I can't mention the title of yet. But I'm doing a mini writer's room for that and running that room. But that's super fun. I mean, it's a Zoom room, of course, but it's like still like, a bunch of writers getting to talk and like plot out and talk about vampires, basically. So I'm doing that. I have a project with Margaret Cho, but we're looking for a director. Like I have a lot of how it works in my TV and screenwriting, you have just a lot of irons in the fire. You just don't know what's ever going to make it to the screen. So you just kind of need to have a lot of balls in the air and hope that one of them goes and hope they don't all go at once. I mean, Anna K is still in development. I can't again talk about that because there's some movement, but we don't have anything big to announce yet. But I'm hopeful that like sometime soon we'll be able to make a fun announcement. Book-wise, it was funny because I saw in the press when I was reading for Anna K, or in some of the material was calling it a duology, and I was like, oh no, I don't know if it's a duology, because in my head, I mean, it's not definite yet, but I do really want to write a third Anna K book. I feel like we got to go to her senior year. I mean, that was the whole point. I feel like she's got to finish high school, and now
that we're gonna get new love in the third book, though. I feel like it'll be time.
Yes, I think I agree with you 100%. I was like, it is time. She is ready. I was like, she needed the summer to mend a little bit her broken heart and a new attitude. But to me, when I think about like book 3, it would be, she really just has to own herself. Like she's out from underneath her parents' thumb. Korean parents are very strict. It took me until like well past college to get out from under it, to be able to be like, okay, I don't have to worry and I don't have to do their path. But it took me a while because you're trying to be a good Korean girl. Like I was raised in a certain way. So
I was going to make the joke like I'm not still under my parents' thumb, but I mean I am still under my parents' thumb, but you know what I mean. Yeah. Just because I do still rely on them frequently for things like babysitting.
Oh yeah.
But it's free babysitting, which is really great. So I can't argue with that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's all really fun. Well, I hope you get the chance to do the third book, because I really want to read it and find out what happens to Anna next. I think it's time for us to open this up to questions from the audience.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm looking through the questions right now, and the most popular one that we have at the top of our list is, you both have characters named B in your books. Katie, who is your favorite character in Jenny's books, and Jenny, who is your favorite character in Katie's books?
I love that question. That's so fun. And I love that we both have a Beatrice. My Beatrice kind of came from Princess Beatrice the Royal, and then also came because my agent has a daughter named Beatrice. So there's like a little bit of a wink wink there. And obviously it's just a very regal name. But I mean, I think I always say it's hard to pick a favorite character, but I feel like in Jenny's books, I felt like, Anna's story in the first book was just so epic. But in the second book, I actually really liked Lolly's story. We haven't talked about it enough tonight, but I feel like that was the one that I was the most continually surprised by. And I had a lot of fun reading it, and I felt like it was very relatable. Actually, I feel like she was in a position that many people have been in at points in their lives, and feeling very torn, and I really sympathized with her.
I guess for me, thinking American Horror. I mean, I kind of think it might be Beatrice. I just felt like, because I was very curious how you were going to do your sequel and continue the story, because it's like what you said earlier, we were in the same place. She was in a sad place too. And I was like, how are you going to switch the love? And then, because it was such a great love story in the first one, and then it's like, how are you going to switch gears? Is it going to change at all? And you did it. Like, I was like so equally obsessed in Majesty with the new person, which I don't want to do any spoilers as well. Like, it's okay.
It's been out for a while. Yeah.
Catherine like totally nailed it. Cause I really did. I was like, should I give Anna like a summer romance or a weird secret fling, or like, even if it was like a big makeout session or something? I really toyed a lot with that. And I was like, sometimes in grief, you do kind of go that direction. Like, you just kind of go wild and, don't want to feel or do whatnot. But I was like, I don't know. Something always told me no, that it wasn't the right choice for Anna. But I guess I just feel for Beatrice so much, because she's in such a terrible position in your book. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, a terrible but amazing position. So it's like hard. I mean, it's not even just like, these are the 1% problems. It's like the one person problem. Like, who's
truly the one person problem.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, no one has like that, and no one understands. So she doesn't have really anyone to talk to, and about like, what does it mean when to serve a country? Like, you're responsible for like a country, and then, but also, shouldn't you be responsible to your heart and who you want as well? It was very well done. And so I was like, that was always so enthralling. So that, to me, in Majesty, I was like the most obsessed with, I guess. But I was trying to think why I named my character Beatrice, because in the book, Anna Karenina, I changed a little bit. Some of the names are the same, but Lolly and Kimmy were Dolly and Kitty in the original. And Beatrice was, Princess was Daisy, I think. And I mean, they refer to them as princesses, as young girls in Russian in the book. And so I think it was Daisy, I think. And I don't know where I came up with Beatrice, but I've always liked the name Bee. And then I guess maybe also the idea that she's kind of a queen bee too, maybe was a little bit of a wink at that. But
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. So our next question, Jenny answered this a while back, but I want to see if you can expand on it. I loved all the music and pop culture references in the first book. Did any songs or artists inspire you while writing the sequel?
Any songs? I mean, I did listen to a lot of K-pop. I didn't, I obviously made up a fictional K-pop group. I didn't want to necessarily go there, but I did really read about the industry and these, K-pop academies and how they come out and how much pressure it is that you have to like, you make it in a small stage, you make it in Korea, they expand you to Asia, you got to make it in Asia before all of a sudden you're big enough to make it to the United States. So, I mean, probably that was the most music I listened to. And again, like the Anna K playlist, which was like from the parties in the 90s, I just wanted to listen to like just the current music of that summer. I definitely am a little bit of a nerd in terms of research. So any dress references that I mentioned, like dresses that they were from the actual collections that were going on at that time of like Resort 2019, because this book does take place. I just wanted, I don't know why I'm just such a specificity nerd about such things. So I just wanted to see, and I was like, ooh, what dress would I wear if I was able to go to like a fancy party in the summer? So that's what I was doing. That was.
Jenny, you're like a copy editor's dream. I'm so impressed by your level of attention to detail. I certainly do not go look and see like what dresses were they making in 2019 to make it historically or accurate. I'm just like making things up. I'm like, she's in a pink gown with chiffon on or something. But that's why it all feels so real. Sorry, I'm jumping in. I also, since you were talking about the K-pop academies, the other thing that I meant to ask you earlier that we hadn't talked about was theater camp. Was so real. Did you go to theater camp? I felt like I was there. Also, I'm forgetting his name, but Lolly's BFF at theater camp is like my favorite. I just want to give him a hug and like sit and drink tea with him. He's awesome.
Wasn't he like fun, Dean? The
friend, the friend that gossiped with her.
Oh yeah,
Jameson.
Yeah, he was so great. Interlochen Theater Camp is a real theater camp. There's Stage Door, which is in like Pennsylvania, and there's Interlochen. And I did not go to theater camp. I've always been like the writer nerd behind the scenes, but I did hang out with a lot of like, in high school, I did like theater in the sense that I was doing the original oratory and debate team, and it was like part of the speech theater department. So I've always had friends who were big into drama. I have a Korean friend here who I met at art school in Brentwood named Lucy, and her daughter Juliet, who happens to be half Korean, went to Interlochen. So when I was talking about like, I was honestly debating between the two, which one I did want her to be like further away from New York City and the East Coast. Like I was like, let's get Lolly out of her comfort zone and put her like, it's in Michigan. And I was researching that, but then I found out that her daughter went to Interlochen and she gave me all the goods. Like she's in the acknowledgments because she was so helpful. I sent her all these questions. She explained how the cabins were all mixed with like music people and theater people, and that Monday nights they had their like dances and they had plans and like what you could walk to, and that the food was terrible. Like, so, big shout out to Juliet because she was just really informative, because again, I really want to go dig in and do sort of the research. So she explained exactly that whole process of like they audition in the first week, and then because Juliet was like the understudy in a certain part, and then what it feels like though, because you're the understudy and you want to be in the big show, etc. So that was invaluable to me, basically. Oh, then this is the funny story with Lucy and Juliet. So Jenna Ushkowitz from Glee does the audiobook for Anna Kay Away again. She did the first one and people loved it. And I was so happy that she came back for the second. So Jenna Ushkowitz is Korean, but she was adopted. So her family, I mean, she was not raised Korean. She does not speak Korean. So during the audiobook in this one, there were many more Korean words because they were in Korea. And she was like, I need to know how to pronounce them. And so she texted me and I was like, I don't know how to pronounce them. So I was like, let me find someone. So then I would text my friend Lucy and I was like, can you pronounce these words for Jenna Ushkowitz? And I sent her a list of words and she voice memoed them on her phone and would send them to me, and then I would text them to Jenna as she was recording. So it was just this like
oh my gosh, I love that. That is such a great story. If it makes you feel better, my audiobook producers also emailed me about words, but they were in German, and I was like, I do not speak German. I just like pulled these from a map of Germany, so we're gonna have to Google this. I don't know.
Totally. It's like, oh, I didn't even know how to do that. So the camp stuff was super fun. I think that's like
so fun. It felt so real. I was convinced. I was like, Jenny, it went at least one summer because I felt like I was there. It was great.
Yeah.
All right. So we have time for one last question. And this question's from Joanna. Will Anna Kay be something we can watch as a movie in the future? And if so, who would you imagine wanting in the lead roles?
This will be a fun one because Katharine, you have to join in and tell me like for dream casting. It's like my favorite game. Even though I work in Hollywood, we still all play this game of like, ooh, who would be your dream cast be? I don't know. I don't know if it's gonna be a movie. We are trying to develop it as a prestige TV drama right now. So yes, I do really very much hope that we'll get it on the screen. I feel good about it. I feel like we have a good shot. In terms of casting, it's tricky. I really do think Anna needs to be an unknown. If you think about that Mindy Kaling show, Never Have I Ever on Netflix, which is so good, that was an unknown Indian girl that they found in Canada that they did a huge open call for. And I feel like just lends this authenticity. Like, obviously Lana Condor from To All the Boys I've Loved is so great, but she's actually not Korean. And it's also that idea that like, she's iconic with that one particular story. So, I mean, she's probably one of the most popular right now. And Hollywood does love to use people that everyone already knows, but I really prefer an unknown. And I think that would definitely be what we would go for. But some of the other characters, when I think about Beatrice is the one, sometimes I think about Maisie Williams from Game of Thrones. Arya, I don't know. That's sort of who I picture. Her with like pink hair, because I just feel like, she just could. I saw her at like a Chanel show. I mean, in a picture, a lot there, and with like pink hair and like a rock star vibe. And I was like, oh my God, she could definitely be like mouthy Beatrice because she was such a badass in that show. And I was like, ooh, it might be a fun thing for her to go to from Game of Thrones because she gets to be super girly and dressed in like crazy heels and like, but still be tough. So that was like one of the only kind of people that I'm always popping my head. But what about you? What do you think, Katharine?
I always find this such a hard question, and similar to you, I really say that it's probably going to end up being, if American Royals were ever a TV show, it would end up being unknowns anyway, most likely. Like good-looking Australians who have to learn to speak in an American accent because that's how every CW show is ever. But I don't actually have. Like I have this big whiteboard in my wall that I'm looking at that's got a bunch of story points on it for my new project, but I'm not one of those authors who like clips magazine photos out and is like, Jake Gyllenhaal is my protagonist or something. I don't really like pick real people to look like my characters. So I don't really have any that I go to. The only one that I often think of is Madeline Pesh, who played Cheryl Blossom on Riverdale. I could see it being Daphne, but that's probably just because she's also like a conniving, devious redhead who has sort of a secretly vulnerable side that only comes out in rare moments. So I've kind of seen her play that character before. So I don't know. It's a really tough question, and I feel like it. You kind of end up just getting lucky if obviously your show gets made at all, but if they find the right people for those roles. I think Anna Kay, I mean, I don't know if your development plans are movie or TV, but I feel like it's TV. I feel like there's so much story there. There's too many characters would get shuffled to the side in a movie. Like you need more hours to really do it justice.
I agree 100%. Because that's the problem with all the Anna Karenina movie adaptations. They only focus on that story, but the story's so much better if you have all the other contrasting love stories. My question is that Vronsky, because you could do stunt casting because if he's only in one season. And the idea would be, sometimes I'm like, do you think that Tom Holland could be like a heartthrob if he was like blonde and got buff and tan? Because he always plays that kind of like Peter Parker nerdy role, but could he be like
I think so. I love that idea. Oh my gosh. Sometimes I hadn't thought of him.
Yeah, and then Timothy Chalamet, I mean, everyone's like, oh my God. Because he's so beautiful. I really do think he should be like this beautiful boy. That would be would be really fun. So.
All right. So that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you so much to those who submitted them. And thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Catherine, for the lovely, lively talk. It was so fun having you guys here. Again, we do have signed copies available of Anna K. Away. Jenny came into our store and signed a bunch of copies. So just click on the green purchase button directly below the viewer's screen. And just make sure to write signed copies in the comment section when you are completing your purchase order. And for those of you who tuned in late, don't worry, a replay will be available very shortly, and we're gonna upload this onto our YouTube channel in a couple of days. And I think that's about it. Have a good night, everyone, and stay safe. All right.
Yes, thank you for having us, and congratulations again, Jenny.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations.
All right. Bye, you guys. Thanks.
Bye.